Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Career Chronicles podcast. I'm Sloan Bartley, your host, and we are joined by my dear friend, Janessa Dunn. So excited to have her here today. This has been a long time coming. I've been wanting to have Janessa on the podcast probably since I started the podcast. You're one of the first people that came to mind, Janessa, that I was like, I've got to reach out and see if she will do the podcast. So I'm excited to introduce you in a moment to our listeners. Before I do that, I want to just briefly overview the Career Chronicles podcast. This started as a way for me to interview women about their experiences in the workplace so that we can better educate organizations on how to recruit and retain women. And I know today we'll be talking about the idea of hiring to retain, and we'll be getting Janessa's perspective on hiring as a leader in the field of college admissions. I also want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. We are sponsored by Spyglass Partners, a staffing firm that specializes in IT, finance and accounting, and supply chain, and also Merit Media that handles all of our back-end media needs and where this podcast is offered on streaming platforms. So thanks to both of our sponsors. Thanks to you for allowing this to happen. So without further ado, I'll introduce Janessa. Janessa is a leader in college admissions at a private liberal arts college with a Master of Education in Higher Education Administration, a Doctor of Education in Higher Education Leadership and Policy, and over a decade of experience in higher education and college admissions. She's also one of the most delightful and caring people I have ever crossed paths with, and was one of the people that mentored me and helped bring me into my first job post my own master's degree. So my first really full-time job, Janessa helped bring me into the fold there. And I'd like to make a note that she's absolutely the best person to go on a road trip with, especially if you're trying to make it a foodie road trip. And we were literally just talking about all of our food spots that we hit on our road trip back in 2018. So would love to redo that trip at some point. But thanks for being here, Janessa. Appreciate it.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me, Sloan. And yes, we ate very well.
We often joke about our meat sweats that we got.
Oh,
the
goodness.
Meat sweats were real.
They were. If you didn't know where you can get those, that's the Midwest and the Plains.
Yeah, the Kansas City barbecue. And then we did steaks in Omaha. What else did we ended up having hot chicken in Minnesota, didn't we?
And great pizza in Minnesota.
In Minnesota, we have great pizza too, with lots of pepperoni. So yeah, we were getting the meat sweats all over the Midwest, which was worth it. We knew going in, we were prepared. Like I remember you did a great job researching and picking out all the restaurants and had a plan so we could like prepare our bodies, prepare our minds for this food road trip, which is great. You're probably the most sought out person to go on that road show program with in admissions.
I enjoy all. It's the experience. It's definitely an experience.
Well, we share the similarity that we experience new destinations through food. I think we both have that in common, that we love to experience new cultures, new places through sharing food with others. I think that's the best way to really, connect with a place.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we've kind of hinted at it, but I always start every podcast off by how did we meet? I'll let you share a little bit about, your perspective of how we connected.
Oh, goodness. Yes, Sloan. I remember the day that I remember before you were hired because you were ending your master's program.
Yep.
And you were at the University of South Carolina at the time, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
and you were interested in making your way back to Nashville.
Yes.
And you were asking questions and very engaged. And I particularly remember the intentional questions that you had in that space.
We went to Starbucks, I think. We had coffee.
Yes,
Catherine connected us because she was at South Carolina.
That's right.
Undergrad together.
Yes, at Georgia Southern. Also another great human being who works in higher education as well. Very enthusiastic and a lot of charisma. And just being able to think through not only what the task of the role were, but also how does one develop themselves, that self-development, what is actually personally fulfilling to you. And I just remember wanting to continue that conversation at the Starbucks on 21st Avenue in Nashville. because of just your deep passion, and you've had that experience in your master's program, but how that would translate here. So it was just such an honor to be able to work with you and to help onboard you
Yes.
into the admissions world, and of course the roadshow and foodie
That was
tours.
the best onboarding
Oh
experience
goodness,
for sure.
best of both worlds.
Yes. Well, yeah, I use you as an example so many times when I'm talking about my own career journey and I'm talking to job seekers, and I give them the advice of don't be afraid to reach out to somebody and ask to go to coffee. And, pick their brains and, get to know what they do in their role. And like you said, what it takes to coach and promote yourself into that role, through that role, and even eventually as you exit that role, find people who will be kind of your sponsors and your mentors and guides through that journey. And that's the best way to know if an opportunity is the right fit for you. So I try to pass that personal experience on to other people. I also try to pass it forward or pay it forward, whatever you want to call it, to people who are thinking about pivoting into recruiting. I try to think back and let me be the Janessa now and have a chat with people. It's all virtual now. Nobody's getting to go to Starbucks on 21st Avenue anymore. It's all over Teams and Zoom, but it's still so important to have those conversations.
I agree, fully agree.
Yeah. Well, you have changed roles since we worked together. So tell us about your transition into your current role.
Yes, absolutely. And so I had the opportunity to serve and to serve in a director of admissions role at a private liberal arts college here in upstate New York within the last year. And it was one of those opportunities where everything aligned the way that I wanted to. And it was also very serendipitous. Like there were some moments where I was like, wait a minute, where did this come from in this space? But I always say that it was one of the best opportunities and the best gifts that I didn't know that I wanted. In this particular way. And the reason why I say that, and as it relates to that transition, is I knew that I wanted to work at an institution that had a very strong mission, a very strong value system about who the institution is and what they desire to do. And working in education, there is this really wonderful opportunity to truly impact the world. And so the late Nelson Mandela always said, one of the most powerful tools with which you can change the world is education in that space. And to be in a space where I personally in a very mission-driven space, and I lead from that space in all areas of my life. And I wanted that alignment, and I found that this particular setting was exactly where I wanted it. But in addition to that, I also had some needs in addition to that. And I wanted to be able to work, for an institution, but not only, but also a leader and multiple leaders who supported my growth and development professionally and personally, particularly as a woman and as a woman of color in that space. And, as someone who is in the millennial stage, and I'm likely am one of the youngest directors of admissions in this world, space, there is this kind of transition of life. What does it mean to be a leader and wanting to have a family? What does it mean to be a leader and have balance and opportunities outside of work without, losing, that's that drive, that work ethic that is also inherent and part of me. And so I wanted someone in a culture that supported all of those areas in which I don't necessarily have to fit in, a square peg in a round hole,
Right.
If you will. So there are a lot of different reasons.
I feel like my synapses are firing. Like there's so many questions I want to ask you. Like I love what you said about, choosing to work somewhere where the leadership, you're going to be in a leadership role, but you also need to be thinking about who am I reporting to and how are those leaders going to be supporting me at this stage in my life. And you definitely have to be, I definitely don't have the data, but you have to be one of the youngest directors of admissions in the landscape, I would say. And you're in a very similar, we're both millennials, we're in a very similar age range. And so you are on this cusp of, thinking about the things you want out of this time in your life. And I'm thinking about previous bosses I've had that have been directors of admissions. They're in a different stage of life. They're, heading towards maybe retirement, or their kids are definitely grown up and out of the house. So from a family perspective, and most of them have been men as well, let that be noted. So it's a very different perspective as a woman who might be on the cusp of, wanting to build a family someday. How did those leaders make you feel supported and make you feel confident stepping into this role that you would be supported, if and when you choose to, build a family someday?
That is a great question. And I will say, even before I transitioned to this role in September of last year, I started writing these things down that I wanted.
Oh, love that.
Maybe about a year ahead of that time. And at the time, I was an associate dean of admissions at another university. And I realized, I was like, okay, I know where I want to be. I was finishing up my doctoral program. I had this passion. And also realizing too, these are the things that are on my wish list. These are the things that I wanted to have the opportunity to engage and to pursue when I had the opportunity to reach that level. And why I say that, that transition was serendipitous is that when I actually had the opportunity to speak with my current boss, and her name is Jess. And I had the opportunity to speak with her before I submitted my application materials for the role. And the conversations and the questions that I asked her, speaking of the coffee and Starbucks, mine was on the phone.
You gotta have those calls, those informational chats.
Yes, it was on the phone. And the responses hit every single thing that I had on that checklist without me even asking.
Oh, wow.
Explicitly. So my questions were leading questions, but they were not as specific where people have to really think through them. And you just can't give a run-of-the-mill response.
Right. That's almost smarter and better, because I feel like when I go into a job interview and you want to ask about like, what's the work-life balance, they know what you're getting at. So they're like, well, the work-life balance is great. And it's like, you almost want to, like you said, craft these leading questions that get them to just share more forthcoming. And that's really smart that you did that.
Oh, goodness. Well, I will say it was also just affirmation of like, okay, this is what this looks like for me.
Yeah.
In addition to having that conversation, I also use my network to say, I know I've heard of some folks who work with this individual. Can you tell me a little bit more about your experience? And the particular individual who I spoke with is also a mom of two very young children who is also very motivated and talented within the admissions field as well. And I wanted to ask their honest opinion as well. No strings attached. Just tell me, what this looked like even during those moments of triumph and those moments that are challenging. And they were honest. And it affirmed that, yes, I could do this. I could work with this leader because it's not just a one-off, it's consistency. It's that piece. And also the leader that I worked with, has also done it herself as well. And so being able to be in a space where, yes, I have to advocate for myself. Self-advocacy is always a great skill to have. And I wanted to be in a space where I wanted to be met part of the way.
Yes.
If you will, especially as I'm navigating, like I mentioned, I'm one of the youngest. I work at a predominantly white institution in a predominantly white area. And there's, of course, there are just so many layers. Like if I can take one of these little layers off of kind of being in a space, what does that look like, right, for me? And being able to have that type of support is incredible.
Yeah, that is, I mean, it's just priceless to have a leader like that. And I love that you started, writing down what you wanted almost a year before it all transpired. And I think that's a great tip and piece of advice that people watching this podcast can take away, is that, we all could do a better job of getting back to writing out our goals. I can't remember the last time I've done that personally, of just like writing out, what do I want to, what are my goals? What do I want to get to? And it sounds like that really was a great practice for helping you kind of set yourself up for success to make this transition.
Oh, goodness. Yes, Sloan. I'm an avid journaler as well. Yeah. And I transitioned from handwriting journals to digital journals.
Oh, how's that been?
It's the notes section on my iPhone.
Really? I was going to ask if you had like an app that was like a journaling app and it's just the notes.
No.
Do you text like, do you have like, like, yeah, I guess you're just texting like on your phone in the notes, or do you like audio, like talk to text?
Sometimes if I'm really tired, I may do the
Yeah, I was gonna
audio.
say my hands would get tired.
And I've gotten
That's
used
my
to it.
biggest problem with handwriting is I'm like one page in, I'm like, man, I'm done. Like I can't
Arm
keep
is
writing. My
tired.
hand hurts. I wonder if
Yes.
like I feel like in the 90s I was able to write a lot more. Like I think I've gotten out of practice, but like in school we used to write papers with a pencil and paper. Like I feel like for
Yeah.
tests we used to
And
write like
cursive.
we were
Cursive.
writing cursive, yeah. And I don't think I remember ever having hand fatigue. And now that is a serious problem with my journaling.
Well, I would say whatever works best for
Yeah,
you, like
whatever
whatever
works.
flows best. Now, granted, my journaling, I've doing journaling consistently for about 10 years.
Oh my
It's just a
goodness.
really great reflective moment for me. I do it every day. And if I forget a day, I pick it up the next day or the next day. But it's just thoughts that I have. And
Yeah,
only, and for me, sometimes it's a to-do list. Sometimes it is what I am seeking.
yeah.
But I love it because it's easily searchable.
Yes. Yeah, smart. That's so true. Didn't think
Yes,
about that.
yes.
Um, yeah, well, I love this this example you provided of your own leader, Jess.
Yes.
It sounds like, as we talk about this idea of hiring to retain, which I know we'll dive in deeper to now, it sounds like she, whether intentionally or not, but she was hiring you to
Mhm.
retain, of like, there was a lot of thought put into the conversation she was having with you. And I don't know if she was aware or not that you were talking to other people in her network about the experience of working for her, but that's really all, like, that's what it takes to hire to retain, is giving people this full picture of what it looks like to work here, so that if they do choose to join, the expectations are set and retention is likely, because they know they know that the fit is there. Um, how did that
Yeah.
experience, going through it as a new hire, how does that influence as you're doing hiring now? Like, how does that influence your approach to hiring?
I'm glad that you asked that question, Slum, because I liken it to my field, or our
Yeah,
field,
the
in
fit.
this case, and as it relates to the college experience and identifying the fit that is best for oneself. And for me as an admissions officer, you know, being in a space where you're looking at all of the values and attributes and talents of an individual and who they are as a whole person, and also aligning, with this institution, with this program, how are their alignment? Like, how can we best support this individual? Do we have what
Yeah,
they want? Do we have what
yeah,
they need? Are there proper support systems? Resources? Are there groups that this person can connect with to help their process, run a little bit more smoothly? And also, when life happens, what are we going to do?
yeah,
In terms of supporting this individual, but also the collective individuals who may have similar experiences. And so I
yeah,
likened the admission process or the college going process for traditional age and non-traditional students, or adult learners, to hiring, and even my own employment process. And so,
yeah.
yeah, those
Do you feel like
questions.
all those things were laid out, like in that conversation with Jess? Those are some of the things that she ended up outlining even without you having to ask?
And I would say it was an introduction, because I think one of the
Sure.
things that I appreciate is there's not always one individual. And as a leader, I have to recognize, and I'm thankful that I have a leader who recognizes this as well. I am here to support, and I'm here to be that nexus point, for you,
Mm,
for resources. And, there's this whole community of
yeah,
people who I want to make sure that you're connected with as well. And so it was really great that my hiring committee was representative of the college, and actually a
mm,
person who was on my hiring committee for my job when I was applying is one of my closest relationships here, not only at my college, but in this region, who connected me, in ways that even my boss said, like, hey, this person knows a lot more than I do. Let me make sure that I'm able to have this person actually physically here while you're meeting. And for me, that individual, her name is Kelly. I had a conversation with her before I accepted the role,
yeah,
because there was very specific questions that I had for her. And it was okay if it wasn't all, you know, sunshine and rainbows.
Sure. It never is. It never can be, right? It's no place is perfect.
No place is perfect. But what I appreciate about it is the authenticity of it.
Was this like a candid phone call, like separate from like give me a call after the interview? Like, let's just like have a kind of off the record combo.
Yeah, just having the opportunity to connect, to learn more about the area. Like for me, it was across.
Yeah, you were moving. Yeah,
like
that's
it
a
was
big decision.
From my hometown, it's a good 15 hours, and so drive. So
and you're not somebody that's not tied to their hometown. Like just for people who don't know you are close to family, close to home in your heart.
Extremely close to family, just like you, Sloan. You're right here. And being able to have folks, to connect. And actually this individual also has a lot of roots not too far away from where we both grew up, which was great. And so it was just beautiful. And then there were other folks who I was able to connect with over time. And so, being able to say that it's typically not just one person.
Yep.
It's a network and it's a give and take. You want to be able to be supported, but you're also not fully relying on one individual. We as humans, we have limitations. And we also have to be recognize and be aware of what those limitations are so that we're best serve the people around us.
I almost think that's probably refreshing for people, including myself, to hear, because I think many of us who have aspirations to move into leadership, you may feel like you have to know everything or you have to be an expert in everything in the field. And this is a great example of you don't. You have to be that connection point to be willing to say, here's the other perspectives I can bring into the room and into the conversation. They're the experts. Let me connect you to them. And you mentioned it earlier that you were looking for a leader and also an organizational culture that would meet you halfway. You know that you're going to have to do some self-advocacy. You're going to have to do some communication on your part, but wanting to be met with an open mind, an open ear, and met halfway of like, you don't have to step that far out of your comfort zone to get, someone to listen to your own advocacy. It doesn't feel like a burden to have to advocate when you're in an environment like that. So I think if there are leaders watching this podcast, that would be one of my other takeaways for them, is to create a culture, both a hiring process and the culture of the current organization, where people feel like they're met halfway and bring other perspectives into the conversation, because that's going to help drive that. I know that you also mentioned, and you've kind of hinted at it, but you told me offline that I think it's every person on your leadership team is a woman. So it's an all women leadership team. I have two questions, I think you've kind of answered this one, but I was going to ask, what is it about the current organization that attracts and retains women in leadership? But you've kind of been outlining that. Is there anything we haven't hit on that you think has cultivated a workplace where women are, not only recruited, but promoted?
I'm so glad that you mentioned that. So my institution was originally a women's college. It was founded as a women's college, and since then has transitioned to co-educational environment. But that's its core mission. It was its core values. But I think not only historically, but just being mindful and being able to be in a space where, the president of our college is male identifying, and he has such a deep respect, for people and humans and the attributes that they bring into the world, and who has so many wonderful accolades in his own right, and also has opportunity to uplift others who are also extremely talented in what they do. And to know that there is that kind of leader, right? Who is a part of this institution, who uplifts, versus bring people down. There's not, you would not describe this individual as egocentric. Even though they
hold the pinnacle position for organization.
Yes. And not only the pinnacle position, but like with substance, right? with all of the, just a lot of really great attributes, academically, but socially and then personally, but who allows other people to thrive and to be uplifted as well. And it's so interesting, Sloan, because it doesn't happen every day where the president is a part of this type of hiring process. But this individual, I had a one-on-one with
when you were interviewing
college when I was interviewing.
What? Oh my
And
gosh.
for me, that was a signal
Yeah.
that this individual cares a lot about
Yeah.
their people.
Yeah.
It cares a lot about the role. And for my role, it's to lead a wonderful team, to enroll more students at my college. But not only individual to do the job, but to know who I am. And one of the questions that he had for me is, what drives you? And it went back to mission center. And so it was just affirmation after affirmation after affirmation of, why am I here?
Yeah.
As long as I know why,
Yeah.
I can get that. I have the other skill sets, but knowing what we were achieving together, and that mission alignment was really important. And I'm so glad that I was able to capture that mission alignment with the leader of the college.
Yeah.
Before I was even hired.
Yeah. Well, it's so important when you're hiring and when you're interviewing candidates to know what it is you're trying to get out of that interview. And it sounds like the president knew that he was trying to really, truly get to know you and make sure that you were going to fit with a mission-driven organization. It sounds like he understands and recognizes that that's what makes this institution special, and that I only want to hire people who are also mission-driven. So it was very important for him, I'm sure, to ask you what drives you and to make sure there was that alignment there. And that's something in the recruiting world we talk about with hiring managers all the time, of like, don't have an interview for the sake of an interview as just another hoop for people to jump through. You really need to try to understand, what are you trying to assess? What are you trying to get out of this conversation with this person? And that's going to make you have a more successful recruiting and hiring process. And obviously your story is a great example of that. I also wanted to, ask you, what have been some differences that you've noticed as a woman in leadership, working with a team of all women versus working with leadership teams that are maybe 50-50 or maybe more dominated by people who identify as male?
That's a great question, because I'm going to be honest with you, I had never experienced it.
I haven't either.
And
so I need you to tell me what it's like.
Well, it's interesting so far because the women that I had the opportunity to work with are all mothers. Every one of them.
I love that. As a recent mom.
Yes, out of the house, and they're adults. And then we have some who are toddler, young, like 5-year-old, and some who are preteens right now. And it's something about the collegiality of just taking off a mask, where you don't
just being real.
Just being real. I will say this, it doesn't mean that it can't exist in other settings, but there's just something about being in a space where there's just an understanding.
Yep.
There's just an understanding of like, hey, like right now, and these are experiences I'm going to be leaning on these wonderful women when it's my time to have children one day. And I'll be also calling you Sloan.
You call me anytime. I got a lot of thoughts.
Like, what in the world do I do? And also, how do I do this while leading this really great team that also needs my support? And also, like, what are you learning about yourself at this age? Because we as women, we have some biological clocks that run simultaneously, and it is a time. It is.
There's some things going on that are biological.
Going on that only women can understand, and it is what it is, as I like to say, and to be in a space.
What it is, but we need to understand. Like we're people that we need to understand what is going on. What is happening.
And just being candid about it. And also, some of the struggles, and I will say I am in a unique environment where the history of my college is one where it was originally a women's institution, and there's been a long-standing history of women in leadership.
Sure.
Here, it does not exist everywhere.
No.
And within my role, I have external pieces as well. And sometimes you end up in a room where you get mansplained, you get no one, and particularly as I mentioned, being young, like some
Yeah.
people just do not assume
Yeah. Yeah.
that I am in the role that I'm in, or even sometimes, the families, they're like, oh, they're shocked, and not always in a bad way by any means, but it's just a recognition of that.
Well,
So
yeah.
how does one stay uplifted and motivated,
Yeah.
you know, consistently,
Yeah.
with that? And so there's just something about being within a lead amongst leaders to have
Yeah.
some understanding of that.
Yeah. I like the way you put it, of that place where you can take your mask off. It's almost like that feeling of coming home. Like they're the space where you can come back and just kind of take the breath and say, I'm safe, I'm comfortable here. Because there are so many spaces when you're meeting with people externally, or when you're meeting with families, where you are going to run into some of those microaggressions that just kind of put your radars up, and you just kind of hear the comments. So I'm sure it's amazing to have a place to come back to, where it's like, I don't have to explain to the room of women, why being mansplained is not an enjoyable experience. So it's nice to just feel seen and be known with that part of your identity. And I think that speaks to the importance of different identities and perspectives being represented across an organization, because the only way we get to have a room like that, a room of all women leaders, or if we wanted to talk about other organizations that have leadership teams that are all people of color, or any type of certain identities, you only get that once you recruit, retain, and promote people up. It's this pipeline, which is an admissions term we talk about, but building that pipeline and hiring is so important. So I'm glad to hear that you guys have done that throughout the history of your organization, that's kind of the history that's allowed you guys to get to the point you're at today. I hope other organizations will kind of implement something similar, and it might not be in all women. It might be just getting different voices at the table
voices at the table.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Janessa, we're at the 30-minute mark. We could probably talk for another hour or so. I'm sure I have other questions I want to ask you. But I know people have lowered attention spans in the day and age of TikTok and the like. So we have to keep it to half hour if we can. So I'm going to ask you the last question, which is, when or where have you felt most empowered as a woman?
Ooh.
It's a toughie to end on.
Oh, Sloan, that is a tough one. When and how?
It's when or where. So some people choose to answer it like as a specific location or a specific environment where they feel most empowered as a woman, like a space where they feel seen and empowered. Some people have more of a timestamp situation of like, during this experience, that's when I felt most empowered. So I kind of leave it open-ended to be when or where.
Wowza. Wowza. I would say, Sloan, when I felt most empowered as a woman, and it's a combination of different pieces, but it's when I'm able to show the multifacetedness of my womanhood.
Yeah.
And so I feel most empowered when, and I forgot to do it today, when I wear my red lipstick. I use it called my Power Red.
Yes.
When, and I love to dress comfortably, but stylishly. And I want to wear my hair the way I want to.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like a light colored blonde. Sometimes it's curly, like it is during the summer right now. And when I am able to not hide who I am. You mentioned the intro about a little bit about my background, and it's sometimes I still have these moments where I'm like, well, Janessa, like, you kind of know some stuff. You like
You're
study.
a literal doctor.
Like you kind of like own it, and not in
Yes.
an egocentric way, but in a way
Oh, you
where,
would never go that direction, so don't ever worry about that.
but in a way that encapsulates you,
Yeah.
encapsulates me, and so I feel most confident when I'm in those spaces. Um, I guess it's a state of being.
Yeah. Oh, I love
Feeling,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that because, yeah, I mean, I think my experience would be similar. That, there's different places where you can feel most empowered, but you're describing is the common theme or the commonalities of what allow a space or time to let you feel your whole self and bring whole self to the space. And it sounds like you have that in your current organization, which I'm thrilled to hear, that you have found that. I hope, anybody listening continues to look for their best fit if they don't already have that in their current workplace. And then I hope anybody listening that's, in a point of influence in their careers where they can create these spaces where people can feel like their whole selves, and take the mask off. That's what I hope they get out of today's conversation. And thank you, Janessa, for being a part of this conversation, being a part of the podcast, and being willing to share so much about your personal and professional experiences. I found it really insightful.
Well, thank you for having me, Sloan.
Yeah,
And,
of
it's
course.
always a pleasure. And yes, we can
Yes.
talk for a long time. We have
Yes.
done that.
Yes, we've had to spend 5-6 hours driving in the middle, like the wind turbines between Iowa and Nebraska. There's not a lot to see or do, so you got to come up with lots of topics to talk about. Although I'm sure I fell asleep on you a time or two. I'm a bad car co-pilot because I fall asleep immediately in the car. But I tried.
Great most of the time.
I tried most of the time. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. We will have to have you back down the road because I know I got a couple more questions to ask you.
Oh, well, thank you, Sloan. I appreciate it.
Enjoy it. Have a great rest of your day.